So the next speaker, the last speaker of this short meeting is F.Patat. Nando is the head of the Observing Programs Office at ISO, and today he will tell us about the news and the recent changes for period 110, and also about the distributed peer review, which has just been implemented.
Thanks a lot, Tommaso. I'm gonna share my screen, and can you see it?
Yes, thanks.
Good. So thanks a lot, Tommaso, for the introduction. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are on the planet. I'm F.Patat. I'm the head of the Observing Programs Office, and as Tommaso anticipated, I will be presenting you the most recent changes in the time allocation procedures at ISO, and also I will spend some time giving you some details on the distributed peer review paradigm, which is the last thing that we have deployed. So this story starts in 2015 when ISO started the 2020 ISO prioritization exercise, and one of the outcomes of that exercise was that ISO should review all the time allocation procedures and come up with recommendations to be then possibly implemented, both on proposal submission and proposal review. So these were the two main tasks. So critically review the proposal submission channels, meaning types of programs and all of that, and identify possible areas of improvement. And also for the proposal review, critically analyze the implementation of peer review at ISO, including also alternative approaches. So that was almost 7 years ago. And then this, of course, has produced a recommendation document that was sent to the DG. And basically, the recommendations aim at achieving two goals. One is philosophical, which means maximizing the scientific return of ISO facilities by selecting the best proposals. And we can debate for a long time what best proposals are, but here it's phrased like the proposals that have the promise to result in significant advancements in science. And the other task is more practical, was to improve the level of feedback that the OPC and panels provide to the community. Now, this is probably the strongest, the main source of criticism of the whole process by the community, that we know that at least 30% of the users are unsatisfied by the comments they get back from the panels. Of course, part of this is inherent to the process, meaning that when you don't get the time, you're typically unsatisfied. And since this is something like, 3/4 of the population each time, of the community each time, do not get the time, and the fact that only 30% of them complain means that, okay, some of them accept the rejection, some others are less happy about that. So, but the bottom line is that it was clear from the report that ISO needs to reduce the number of proposals which are assigned to the panel members. This is a clear problem. It was signaled by the panels already many years ago. Depending on the panel where you are, you may get between 80 and 100 proposals, and you have to read them all, discuss them, and then provide feedback to the user. So it's no surprise that with such a load, the level of feedback and even the level of review cannot be ideal. The situation is very stressful. So the time allocation working group produced a report which contained 10 recommendations. I will not go through them, of course, through them all, and I will just describe what we have done. But the approach by ISO that was announced to all the governing bodies, and including the users committee, was that we would go through a gradual approach. So we'll not deploy everything in at one time. We would, go step by step, starting first with the simple ones, see what happens, and make them in such a way that they could be reversible and also subject to revision. Now, the first step was to move to yearly cycle the large programs. In the past, we were calling for large programs every semester, but this was judged to be an overkill, especially considering that large programs typically run over 2 years. And so this was an overload both on the community and on the panels, who had to review basically the same proposals every semester. And since the large programs are also larger in terms of material provided by the PI, that meant more work. So as of period 104, it's possible to call for large programs and to apply for large programs only in even periods, so which means that the next one, 110, for which the call is open until March 25th, it's possible to apply for large programs. This has been now in place for a couple of years. And in parallel with that, we have also proactively inserted some instructions in the call for proposals encouraging for the submission of larger programs. You see here in the diagram to the right, you see the time distribution, and you can see that this is hours in the horizontal scale and number of proposals. I can tell you the median submission time is 16 hours, which means that 50% of the VLT, this is only VLT proposals, 50% of the VLT proposals request 2 nights or less. And then there is the 5-night desert, basically above 50 hours, you see there is basically nothing. And then above the 100 hours, you have the large program. So there is no clear reason as to why there are no proposals in that area. There are a number of explanations, but the absurd fact is that the trending you see to the left is the trending average and median time per proposal, starting from the start of VLT operations up to P110. You see that the time has been steadily decreasing. And on the right, you see the blue dots, which are the proposals between 0 and 10 hours, that have been increasing steadily and continuously, while the others have been decreasing in time, which means that the number of proposals has increased, but the amount of time per proposal has decreased. So we have been assisting or witnessing a proliferation of small proposals, which arguably cannot lead to major breakthroughs, especially with a telescope that is 25 years into operations. That may be different when we'll start the ELT. Even 1 single hour of ELT time may make a big discovery. I believe this is not the case for the VLT anymore. So that step is already in, we are monitoring it. It looks like both on the OPC side, which, as you can imagine, tended to be conservative and kill more frequently longer programs. So we are instructing the panels that they should not do that. They should just grant the time which is required based on the scientific case. And the second is that the community is reacting, meaning that people are requesting more larger normal programs. The next step was to reduce the number of pre-meeting reviews from 6 to 3, so basically halving the load on the panels. But we will revert to that after we deploy DPR, and because DPR by itself, as I will explain in a few minutes, is supposed to reduce the load on the panels by 50% or more in the future. So we can restore the 6 reviews, which will help to provide better feedback to the proposals, especially to those which are triaged. Then another thing that was contained in the recommendations was about the equality, both in gender, countries, affiliations, and fairness in the process. We have started obfuscating the proposal team information. This was already in 103. As I said, we went step by step. So we first started to alphabetize the list, move it to the last page, and the countries and affiliations were removed. And then the next step was to make the proposals fully dual anonymous, which means that the reviewers do not know who the applicants are. There was a dry run in 106, which was only used for training the community and the panels. Then this was consolidated in 108. You may remember that 107 was skipped because of the pandemic. And then fully deployed in period 109. By fully deployed, I mean that people who proposals that violated the dual anonymization guidelines were rejected. So were flagged by the panels, considered by the Observing Programs Office, and the recommendation was made to the Director General for disqualification. I am happy to say that that was at the level of 1%, and in many cases it was clear that there were oversights and leftovers from previous submissions. So now I will give you some more details on the distributed peer review. The concept is rather simple. So there was a seminal idea by Merrifield and Sahari in 2009, and the title of the paper was Telescope Time Without Tears. And that paper came out of frustration from Merrifield, who had just served in one of the ESO panels, and he decided by himself that this cannot be the case anymore. And so together with a mathematician, they devised this method. The idea is simple. You submit a proposal, and if you submit it, you implicitly accept to act as a reviewer of typically 10 proposals, but also you accept that your proposal is seen by an equal number of your peers. So that is the concept. Me also implies that if you submit 2 proposals, you will get 20 to review. If you submit 3, you will get 30, which will probably act as a control mechanism for avoiding the proliferation of multiple proposals submitted. You may believe it or not, but you should believe, because the numbers are what they are, that we have people submitting 5, even 10 proposals in the same semester. And this is clearly an attempt of play a game of a lottery, which is not the case. At least it just produces more load on the panels without, without really increasing the scientific output at the end. And then one further condition of the Merrifield and Sari approach was that if you fail to deliver your comments evaluations by the given deadline, your proposal will be automatically rejected. Now, the original Merrifield and Sari idea also had a penalization mechanism, meaning that the system could easily realize if you were penalizing systematically the proposals by other people, like, giving to all of them a very bad grade. The system would recognize that, say by basically the median or the average of your grades, and push down your proposal by the same amount. So it's a punishment mechanism. Both at ALMA and at ESO, we have decided that we will not do this. We will monitor the performance, and we will readjust the grades, the distribution of your grades to align it with the others, and we will not apply penalizations unless we notice real systematic, over time, systematic behaviors, or say non-conform behaviors. Good. So DPR at ESO, as you probably remember, we ran an experiment back several years ago, and the results were published by me and by Wolfgang Kerzendorf. There is a paper on Nature Astronomy on that in 2020. The analysis of the experiment, which was done on a fully voluntary base at the time, was presented to all governing bodies, the UC, the OPC, and the STC. They gave feedback, which we used, and based on the outcome of the ESO DPR experiment, ALMA, as a matter of fact, has already deployed DPR as of cycle 8. So the last cycle of ALMA was done in that way, and there's more than 80% of the proposals went through the DPR channel, and this may evolve even further in the future. I will spend some words on that for the ESO case. Now, Council has approved the insertion, based on this, the insertion of DPR in the VLTI and VLT-VLTI science policy document. So it's part of the authorized procedures, and the DG has approved the deployment of DPR at ESO as of P110. And this is what we are going to have. We've already received a few proposals, and I can tell you that half of them, it's a small number statistic, but half of them will go through DPR for the time being. It's only 5 proposals we are talking about. So, as I said, DPR is deployed at ESO, and the next proposal submission deadline is March 25th, as it was already mentioned before me. So, how did we do this? So we started an information campaign before we informed the governing bodies, especially the users committee representatives. Then we sent emails before the call was out, a few days before, emails to all active PIs of the last 5 years. This is more than 2,500 emails that we sent out announcing the deployment. Then there was an official ESO science newsletter. And this, of course, as it was mentioned already by Carlos, it was announced in the call for proposals with details. There is a link that points to a very extensive page with the basics, the concepts, the guidelines, and the rules to which you obey and you implicitly sign to obey by submitting the proposals. Now, this is a tentative period, 110, so it's the first that we deploy. And we decided to go for this 16 hours limit. So proposals asking for less than 16 hours will be automatically assigned to DPR. So at submission time, when you push the button submit, the tool will calculate the total time, and it will inform you about which review channel your proposal will be assigned to. This number is not random. It was, as I said, it was fixed to have, as a tentative starting experiment, half of the proposals going through DPR and half of the proposals going to the panels. Of course, It's impossible to predict how the community will react to this. It may be that the fractions are slightly different. Maybe there are more DPR programs that we plan, but this will be fine. And this number will certainly evolve in the future, will probably increase. So we are gaining experience and also seeing, talking with our colleagues at Alma to see how things go. And, we will collect the reactions from the community and from the panels to see how it goes. There are exceptions to this. As I said, by definition, large programs request 100 hours, and therefore they will always go to the panels. And then there are exceptions like the joint programs. For the time being, this is only the XMM VLT proposals. Irrespective of the time that you ask for, they will go through the panels. And also the calibration programs and normal programs, including target of opportunity runs, they will be reviewed by classical panels, irrespective of the time they request. This is because the policy foresees that. So until we modify the science policy, things will stay like this. As a consequence, when you submit a proposal, you will get 10 proposals per submitted proposal to review. The PIs, as is the case at Alma, can delegate the review to one of the COIs, and this was put in place to address issues created by, for instance, students or junior scientists that do not feel like they are in the position, they feel uncomfortable with running the review, and nevertheless they want to be PIs of the proposal, so they can delegate to a more senior person in the team. So in the interface, they will have the list and they push a tick button, and that will delegate the function to the delegated person. So the proposals for DPR will be distributed using the new set of keywords, 2 to 5, from the same set which is used in the user portal for the profiles. Now, this is a change with respect to the past. This is an important change. In the past, for those of you who have already submitted a proposal, you would certainly remember that you were asked to specify a category and a subcategory, like stellar evolution and supernovae, for instance. This would be D5, and that would be the only thing that you use to profile your proposal. Now we are changing this to allow for a better distribution. So what we are asking you at the proposal preparation level is that you will have a pull-down menu where you can select between 2 and 5 keywords, and the keywords now are several hundred. So, and they are very similar, if not identical in many cases, to those of ANA. So it's much more granular than it used to be in the past. And you can give them, you specify them in priority order. So the first keyword is the one which captures most of the spirit of your proposal, and then the others in decreasing importance. This priority is the same way specified in your user portal account when you describe yourself as a scientist and you give your profile. The two sets may be identical, but not necessarily. You may be a supernova expert in the user portal profile, but you may be submitting a proposal on white dwarfs, and so the two sets will be different. So it has to be understood that the keywords you provide in the proposal are meant to characterize the proposal, while the keywords that you provide in the user portal, they are meant to characterize you as a scientist and as a potential reviewer. So the reviewers will give grades in the same scale of the OPCM panels. 1 is top and 5 is the bottom. So this is going to be very clear in the interface, which is going to be very simple. Then the 10 grades of a given proposal will be aggregated to compute the final rank. And each reviewer will have to enter the feedback to the PI. So each of you will get 10 proposals, maybe slightly less because of possible conflicts, which you can signal in the interface. And for each of them, you will give a grade and a comment. There are instructions on how the comments should look like. They cannot be too short. They have to be proactive. They have to suggest and highlight weaknesses of the proposal and possibly ways of improving it. And you have to keep in mind that this feedback will be provided one-to-one to the applicants. So languages to be appropriate and possible violations of this will be taken care of, will be signaled and flagged. Typically, the experience from Alma is that this doesn't happen. People behave very, very well. So the PIs, as I said, will be provided with the 10 independent unedited comments as opposed to the single collegial panel comment that we are used to. So when you will get your reviews, you will be given a full spectrum of the opinions which were in the panel, which will allow you to understand whether there was consensus. And the consensus, the lack of consensus may mean that your proposal was not very well written, as Carlos said, and this applies to all proposals. You have to keep in mind that the reviewers are not necessarily experts in your field. So you have to write your proposal in such a way that it is readable and understandable by a scientist, by an astronomer, by a physicist, but not necessarily by somebody that does exactly what you do. As I said, the multiple keywords are specified in the user profile by all users who intend to submit a proposal, and this is already in place since P105, so we have started that already several years ago because we were, expecting this to come, and all users have specified 3 to 5 keywords. So we have something like 800 full profiles in the user portal now, which are very useful and are going to be very useful also for other statistical reasons. You see here to the right a screenshot of exactly what you see, identical in the user portal and in the P1 proposal interface. So you have, say, families of keywords, like here you see stars or the sun, planetary systems, then you push a button, then they are exploded, and you add, and they end up. This is my profile. You see I've specified supernovae as first, and I have ISM, dust extinction, then I have stars evolution and gamma ray bursts, and means that gamma ray bursts in my profile are the ones with the lowest priority, while I put supernovae at the top because I am a supernova expert. So exactly in the same way, you will specify the keywords in your proposal. And if you submit more proposals, these sets of keywords may be different, of course, because they should capture the content of the proposal, and they will fully replace the old system of category and subcategory. As I said, they are specified in priority order, so that the matching algorithm will look into these priorities and try to do a best and fair distribution, so that we make sure that all proposals get more or less the same kind of expertise matching. It does not necessarily mean that your proposal is going to be seen only by experts, because we are going to go for a mixture of them. But what we want to make sure is that all proposals get, so there are proposals which are not disfavored, like an extreme case in which a proposal is assigned to all non-experts. So this will not happen. So we are following the ALMA example, although we are making it more sophisticated. So we go for a proposal referee matching score using similarity cosine, and this will be used in P110. We are still refining the distribution algorithm, which is going to be quite sophisticated. And as I said, this is based on self-profiling. So you will self-profile yourself as a reviewer, and you have already done if you have submitted a proposal. And you will self-profile your proposal by specifying those keywords. Of course, this is subjective and limited. And so we are looking into future and better, more reproducible and objective ways of doing that. We have already ideas about that. In fact, in the DPR experiment, we have used a machine learning approach by which both the proposal and the reviewer are profiled through the text. So the proposal is obvious. You go through the proposal and you produce a digital fingerprint which captures the concepts of the proposal. And you do the same on the reviewer, now using his or her published papers. So basically, in principle, it's very simple. ISO downloads all the papers of the given person and runs the machine learning algorithm and gets a vector, of acknowledge vector, as we call it. And then you look for angles in the hyperspace between each single proposal and each single reviewer. So you build a big matrix of scores, and then you go for an optimized solution, and you find your distribution. We use a similarity cosine as a figure of merit. It was successfully used in the DPR experiment, and we are discussing it also with the ALMA, HST, and ESA to see whether we can find a common approach, maybe open source, to this problem. To this effect, I'm glad to announce that we applied for an ISO workshop to be held in September. Let's see whether it's accepted. The title of the workshop is Peer Review Under Review, and we want to bring together the experts in the field to come up with possible solutions. I'm getting close to the end. So as I said, ISO will consider a machine learning approach as a recommender. This has to be clear, is a recommender because the final decision is going to be taken, say, by humans here, but as a recommender for the proposal referee matching. It will be objective and reproducible, meaning that whenever you run it, it will always give the same results, independent of what the user think about their own proposal or themselves. And taking into account a number of aspects of the conflicts and all of that. The most suitable approach is under discussion. So there is also the possibility of having a commercial initiative. You can see on the web there is this Profit Science service, which is a public service that is not free of charge, though, that does already the job for different purposes, not just for assigning reviewers, but also for finding papers that match your interests, for instance. The problem is very similar. Now, the next steps in following the recommendation of the time allocation working group are as follows. So we will move to a yearly cycle. ISO has been operated now for 60 years, calling proposals twice a year. And there may have been very good reasons in the past, but now this is not the case anymore. We have been doing this, we have kept this tradition more for historical purposes than for scientific purposes. If you think about that, by doing semesters, we basically force people and the panels to resubmit and review the same identical proposals simply because they cover, one needs to cover a full rate ascension range. This is a drawback of the semester scheme. Your stars are all over the places, so you would like to submit the same proposal only once. And this would also give you the guarantee that you get all the time to cover all your rate ascension range, while we all know that if you apply twice with an identical proposal, it's never 100% guaranteed that you get time in both cases, which creates lots of problems. It creates overloads on the panels for nothing. And also the reaction time in terms of publications is that it takes 3 years to reach 50%, and it takes many more years to reach 95%. So this reaction time that was claimed in the past, that you need to be able to submit a proposal every 6 months, is gone. Now, none of us has this kind of reaction times. And in the case you have or you need, there's the second point. So we will introduce a fast track channel. So this is a continuous or staggered review via the DPR. It's very similar to what they had, the fast turnaround cycle that they have at Gemini. It's similar to the TDDT process, meaning that there is no deadline. It's open, you submit, and is reviewed, maybe in staggered chunks for a number of reasons. And the yearly cycle and the fast track channel may come by the end of 2023. This depends on a number of things, and the last not being the fact that for this we need to have a new scheduling tool that is able to deal with a more dynamical scheduling. The current tool, which is called Tattoo, cannot cope with that. So there are a number of things that we need to do before that. So that is the plan, and we hope that by the end of next year we're going to be able to do that. Another interesting point for you is that the scheduling function, which was always has been always under the Observing Programs Office, or the visas section before the name changed, which means my department, is going to be transferred to the user support department, and that is part of the points that I mentioned above, because this will create a more dynamical operational entity that will be able to cope with the changes and with the proposals coming in, also more closely attached to the observatory. We will introduce a filler channel with a simplified review process, meaning that if you have a proposal requesting poor conditions, and you know that you think normally would have no chance to go through because maybe the science case is weak or not so appealing, well, we will have a new channel for those proposals, and those will go through a very light review. It will be technical by the observatory to see whether the proposal does qualify for the filler conditions, and may be seen only by one single referee, who would only say yes or no just to make sure that it makes sense and is not a real waste of time. So to make sure that there is a scientific case. Those proposals, when approved, will go into the queues exactly as now the C-rank programs go, which means with no priority. So you know that by submitting a proposal in that channel, chances that you get the time are very high, because we need proposals to fill in poor weather conditions. However, it will not be guaranteed that you get the data. So a distinction must be done here between a poor proposal with a very good scientific case, and that should not be a filler. It should be sent as a normal program, and it may get A rank, independently of the fact that it requires seeing 2 and thin conditions. So if the science is strong, you should go for a normal one. If the science is weak and it just serves the purpose of not keeping a telescope idle, the filler channel will be the solution. We have now that somehow in place, but it is much more cumbersome. The panels have to read it, and there is this misconception that proposals requesting poor conditions are poorer than the others. So this will address that, in addition to decreasing also the load on the panels. Finally, we are introducing a VLT ALMA joint channel. It's an important thing. It was part of the requirements that were put in by the time allocation working group. The discussion has started with our partners at ALMA, and the implementation in terms of submitting these proposals and the P1 ISO interface are already in place, so it will be already possible. It's more of a matter of policies and agreements and scheduling of these programs, which would come in a asynchronous way between the two facilities. The purpose, I think, is clear to everybody. Now, if you want to have time both on VLT and ALMA, you have to submit 2 proposals to 2 different observatories with 2 different tags that have different timings and also different oversubscription rates, which means that it is very, very difficult to get time on both facilities. So you get time in one and not in the other, and therefore you need to resubmit, and this creates delays and it compromises basically the science case. By creating a joint channel, the proposals will be reviewed only by one of the 2 bodies, and this probably will alternate and will be some other criterion. And each of the 2 bodies will have the power of allocating time on both facilities. There will be a cap as a maximum amount of time that ISO can allocate on ALMA and ALMA can allocate on ISO. But certainly for the top rank proposals, this will guarantee that once they are accepted on both facilities, and this will ensure that you will get the data from both facilities. This was my last slide, and I think I can now stop the presentation. And if there are any questions, of course, I'm here.
Thanks a lot, Nando, for that very interesting presentation. So I see that there was a comment in the chat from Kevin Nolan. It's a question. So it says, asking for 10 proposals to be reviewed sounds severe. And for new observers who do not have more experienced colleagues, the quality of reviewing will be surely naive. I don't know if Kevin wants to expand on this.
Well, I can comment on that, of course. Yeah, but that is, the comments of this specific person will be only 1 out of 10, exactly for the same reason. So the weight of those comments and the grade will be, marginal to the final effect of the, the evaluation of the proposal. And this is something, it's something that cannot be avoided. And it also, the purpose of this exercise is to train those people to become good reviewers in the process. The statistics say that it's less than 10% of the applicants are students. So it is expected that these cases will, occur exactly at that rate. So maybe 1 out of 10 of the reviewers will be a junior person.
A follow-up question from Kevin is 10 a fixed number?
No, it's not a fixed number. It's a tentative number because it's a reasonable number. I mean, 10 proposals is something that you can keep in your mind when you review them. It cannot be much smaller than that. It cannot be much larger than that, because if you can imagine to an extreme in which we ask only 3 reviews. 3 is a small number. You may get all good proposals or bad proposals, and it will be difficult for the reviewer to put them in scale. Already 10, it's borderline. If you ask me, I would say 15. But comparing to the 80 to 100 proposals that panels have to review, you may say 10 is a big number. No, it's a small number. It's a small number. People will have typically between 4 and 6 weeks to do the review. So you can devote many days if you want to each single proposal. So it's compared to what happens in the panels is a minimum load. Anyway, the number is not fixed. It's configurable in interface. We'll see how things will evolve. Also, we expect that typically you will have one or two conflicts. So you will reject some of the assignments, and we do not plan to replace the assignments. So you will be given a list of 10 proposals, and then you will be able to select up to a maximum of 2. This is the initial start, up to a maximum of 2 conflicts, which could be personal or scientific. Personal means that notwithstanding the anonymization of the proposal, you do realize that this proposal was submitted by your office mate, because I mean, you know what he does, and or by a friend of yours or a former collaborator, and that is personal. Scientific is more general and is more, ill-defined, but it could be that you're, okay, I am not in a position of expressing an objective opinion because this is clearly, I don't know who that is, but it is clearly a competitor because my proposal is very similar. So if I am honest, I say, I am, we leave this, of course, to the honesty and ethics of people, and we cannot police that, it is clear. And the same happens in the panels, by the way. People having conflicts, they can shut up and I don't signal them. So it is expected typically that you will have less than 10. It's going to be probably going to be 8 or of that order, say, which is a small number.
Thanks, Nando. There is a hand raised by Julian Alvarado Gomez. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay, ciao Nando. Thanks a lot for the presentation. One question that I have, you mentioned that people requesting below 16 hours, I believe, are going to be immediately sent to DPR. For the proposals that are asking for a little bit more time, will they also get 10 proposals to review, or will be they will be out of the DPR process?
No,
basically the question is everyone getting the 10 proposals to review, regardless of where? Okay.
No, only if your proposal qualifies for DPR. So if you are asking for less than 16 hours and the other conditions that I spelled, you will get 10 proposals. If you are requesting 17 hours, you will not. Your proposal will be seen by the panels. So as I said, this is tentative in this semester. We may increase that threshold in such a way that more and more proposals are sent to DPR in the future, to the extent that we may evolve into a condition in which only large programs and survey programs are reviewed by the panels, and everything else is reviewed by the DPR. So the short answer is no. If your proposal qualifies for DPR, you will get 10 proposals. Otherwise, you will not. You will see this when you submit the proposal. Before submitting the proposal, you will get a pop-up window which tells you whether your proposal qualifies or not for DPR. If it doesn't, it will just say, thank you very much, you submit, and that's it. If it qualifies for DPR, it will say, by submitting the proposal, you accept to review 10 proposals, and you also accept that your proposal is seen by 10 of your peers. If at that point you do not agree on that, well, you have different choices. You do not submit the proposal, and you just go home and you do something else. Or you start thinking, how can I make my proposal larger in such a way that I don't have to review the proposals? Now, of course, this is not the approach we envisage people will follow. I mean, you have a science case in mind, you need X hours, and this is what you should apply for, regardless of whether it will go to DPR or not, regardless. So if you do your calculation and it comes out to be 15.5 hours, and you say, well, now I'll play a trick and I add an extra hour because I want to have another calibration, and will move me to the non-DPR because I don't want to be reviewing 10 proposals. Of course, you can do that, but that's not the correct approach. On the other hand, if you need 30 hours, you have to ask for 30 hours, because there are people that would prefer to go through DPR, and then they start thinking how they should tailor their science case in such a way that it goes to that channel. So this is wrong. The cure to this, of course, is that, which I already hinted, in the future, all proposals will go to DPR, so there will be no such a kind of thing. So if you wish, this is experimental. We want to see how the distribution of requested time, which I've shown, will change with the deployment of this new paradigm.
Next, we have a hand raise from Sil Verberna. You can unmute yourself.
thank you for the talk. So I was wondering, you mentioned about the, I think you called it dual anonymous, so that the proposal is not recognizable by people reading it, right? So how do you deal, for instance, with self-referencing? Because for a lot of proposals, you might want to refer to old work from which you might be recognizable, right?
Well, it's simple. If you go through the guidelines, there are worked out examples, but you can refer to previous work by the team without saying who you are. And there is a section which is not visible to the panels in which you can be completely non-anonymous. You describe exactly what you have done. While in the text, you say, as we have shown in the past, and you don't quote the reference, or you quote private communication, there are a number of things. If the panel has a doubt and they don't believe you have done that, they can ask us to verify, and we can do that without telling them any name. So they can ask, is it true that this team has done this and that? And we can do that. Now, the experience both at HST and here now is that the panels will trust you. So they start from the assumption, which in 99% of the cases I think is a correct assumption, that you are honest, that you say what you say corresponds to truth. So self-referencing is possible. It has been used now for several semesters. It's just that it needs rephrasing. If you go to the guidelines, you will find out worked out examples which you can even cut and paste into your proposal, and you are sure that the panels will not question about the anonymization of that of those sentences.
Okay, next we have a question in the chat from Julia Bodensteiner. She says, thanks for the nice overview. How will feedback for the proposals work with the new DPR?
Yeah, as I said, the concept is going to be slightly different with respect to the panels. In the old system, or for half of the proposals in 110, when the feedback comes from the panel, you get one single comment, which is typically written by the primary referee in that case, and should gather the result of the discussion in the panel. As you can imagine, that is difficult. So it has to be an average comment that somehow collects the opinions. They may be very discordant, and yet it only can be one single comment. And this is what you're going to get. For the DPR, it's different. As we said, you will receive 10 different comments from each of the reviewers. So the feedback is going to be much longer, as a matter of fact, by construction, because there is a minimum length that each reviewer has to provide in terms of text, so several paragraphs, and there are clear instructions of what they should write. And this will give you a better or larger spectrum view of what the panel thought of your proposal, because in the other case, you get an average and you get a quartile classification, but you never know how the panel was, had consensus or not. So having these different 10 comments, it may be confusing at the beginning, but it will allow you to understand how many people you managed to convince, for instance. So if you see that there's a strong discordance, or there are many negative comments and only one was good, yeah, it probably means that your proposal was not convincing. And that's another thing that I didn't mention, is that you, as a PI, when you receive this, for each of the comments, you will have a box where you can choose between 3 items, useful, mid, and not useful, so that we will then retrofit this into the system to understand how useful you found the comments that were provided to you to improve the quality of the proposal for a future submission. And we are going to log this and examine and see, is this correlated? So the quality of the comment, does it correlate to the juniority or seniority of the reviewer, to the field, to the instrument? This will allow us to do a lot of those exercises. In principle, one could also use this to give, like in Amazon, when you are a reviewer of a product, you get stars, or like in Stack Overflow, when you provide feedback on software and you get stars. So you are qualified as a better reviewer. Whether we will use this to weight and to distribute proposals in the future is still to be discussed. it's a possibility which is enabled by the system. For the time being, it's just to monitor the performance, to make sure, if we get all bad feedback and we can compare with what we had in the classical system, this is a first figure of merit to see whether or not DPR does a better job. So it is fundamental that we have that. I hope this answered your question, and maybe also a question that you didn't pose.
Thanks, Nando. So just want to point out to everyone that there are a few links posted in the chat by Marina and Carlo with links to the dual anonymous guidelines with examples,
Thanks a lot.
guidelines, call for proposal link, and the general page. Then I see a hand raised by Carlo.
Hi, Nando. So you said that the grades are going to be, so the grades I give are going to be renormalized after I give them, or?
So this is still under discussion. This is what happens in the panels. In the panels, we normalize the distributions of the reviewers in such a way that in the end they have the same average and dispersion. And the purpose of that is to bring them on the same scale, to remove, say, systematic behaviors of misconceptions about the scale, which is normal because this is a subjective. You have some reviewers that give grades between 1 and 2 only, and people that give only grades between 3 and 5. And so you need to bring them. Now, this is possible and statistically robust in the panels where you have distributions with 50 to 80 points, say. With 10 points, it starts to be a little bit debatable how statistically significant that is. So at the moment, Teresa is doing simulations to see what is best. We could only, realign them in average and don't touch the distribution. And instead of using, the sigma, we should maybe use the interquartile, this kind of thing. This is all under discussion. Now, this problem is being solved at ALMA in a different way. Instead of asking you to provide grades, they ask you to provide ranks. But that has other major limitations, which we at ISO believe are stronger than the ones which are provided by the grades. By the way, with the grades, you can always produce a ranking, while the opposite is not possible. So we will study this and see, based on the simulations, which one gives a better reproducibility, say, of some ideal case. That's the idea. So yes, we are evaluating that, and most likely this is what we will do.